My daughter Edie's just not normal. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm single now, and I don't get around much, but it didn't used to be like that. She chased them off. My first husband, her dad, was a lovely bloke, Terry. But he lost his nuts because she wouldn't stop clinging to me all the time. She was the neediest 3-year-old you ever saw. I couldn't go to the loo in peace. And her older sister didn't behave like that. Mind you, the less said about Emmy, the better. Terry felt that I neglected him for the kids. Edie would scream if I didn't give her any attention, and he said I should just ignore her. It was hard. I tried to make it work, but he dumped me. I don't think he was ready to be a dad. You want to have fun in your 30s, don't you? But still, it hurt. And he was so angry with me. He didn't want to pay any child support. The last place I wanted to go was court, but he gave me no choice. And afterwards he said he'd never forgive me for that they weren't his kids. I only ever went with him, and that's the truth. 8 years later, I met Doug, and it was love at first sight. He was a bit classy. He'd get 10 quid bottles of wine for our dates, and he'd be teaching me to tango. Our wedding was in a ceremony with the colour scheme pale blue and lavender, though Edie did nearly ruin it by refusing to come. I was gobsmacked that she could be so mean. Eventually, Doug said, "Leave the little cow to stew." I realised then that it was my wedding I should be happy about, whether or not she came. We had the most fabulous honeymoon in Paris. We danced by the Seine, kissed under the Eiffel Tower. But when we got home, Doug went to the bedroom. I heard him cry out, and then a horrible thud. Edie had crushed all his tennis balls and just threw them over the floor, and he tripped over them. He loved playing tennis. I don't think she realised how nasty it was, though she didn't stop there either. It was constant, relentless spitefulness. Once, she threw away Doug's favourite razor. It was the only one that gave him a good cut. So he smashed her precious frog figurines, and she got my curling tongs and burnt a mark all over his clothes in embarrassing places. We realised when we were out shopping, and I saw a burn in a rather unfortunate part of the body. "Doug," I said, "I think you need to take a peek at your bottom." I had no idea then that she'd done it. He went ballistic when we got home, and he realised how far she'd gone. Quite right. OK, so he hit her, but he was quite provoked. Meanwhile, all of Edie's antics meant that I didn't notice what was going on with Emmy. You see, Emmy had started drinking. First, she did it out of the house, saying she was staying with friends. Then I started finding bottles in her room, like under the bed. It turns out she was climbing out the window when I thought she was asleep. Edie told me that later. I was terrified that the neighbours were going to find out what was going on. And I was trying so hard to sort of try to keep her on a course But she'd had none of it. She didn't stop behaving like that. She'd just snort. The clothes she wore, skirts and shorts that hardly covered her, showing her midriff, dyeing her hair. And then she stopped talking to anyone, even though Emmy shared a room with her, and they'd always been so close. Doug told me I was a terrible mum. He said the whole situation made him ashamed of us. Emmy ran away when she was 17, leaving a note saying, "Don't try and find me." I cried for 2 weeks after. And then Doug and I sat down and talked about what we should do. And we decided the only thing we could do was to give her time. After all, she wasn't willing to listen. But she still hasn't come back. That was 14 years ago. So she's 32. By now, I try not to think about her, because I get so angry sometimes that I could kill her. I mean, what sort of child would do that to her mum? I gave birth to 2 stones around my neck. After that, Doug started trying to convince me that I should kick Edie out. It all came to a head when she was 19. She was too young to be out there. I mean, she'd only got herself to blame. She'd been harassing Doug since he moved in. But I just couldn't do it. So I said to Doug, "She's staying." And I told Edie that she had to stop, and she had to apologise, and she had to make sure that she behaved in future. I had to bribe her with a lot of chocolate buttons. I thought he'd get over it, but he wasn't the type of guy to give up. He started trying to talk Edie round, telling her about the good old times she'd have when she were free of me, which I was quite offended by, really. I mean, I understand that everyone thinks a mum and her daughter at loggerheads, but Edie and I loved each other, and there was nothing anyone could do about that. Eventually, Doug said he was leaving unless I kicked Edie out. It was terrible, because I knew it wasn't his fault, it was hers. But I couldn't. But he didn't give up. He still loved me. For years after, he'd call up every so often and say things like, "Darling, ditch that monster and come and live with me in London. We'll dance by the Thames every night." He was such a romantic. But I told him I couldn't leave Edie. I remember how pleased she was the day he moved out. I told her to get out of my sight. She'd got what she wanted. That's what I told her. I said, "I hope you're thrilled that you've destroyed my happiness." I don't think she cared. I didn't get another bloke after that. I wasn't the right age anymore. And anyway, it was scary outside. Everyone was so unpleasant, so I started stopping in. Meanwhile, Edie, pleased as punch, would be watching Vicar of Dibley and Ab Fab and 40 Towers every night, and we talk about her strange colleagues and Mrs. Cushing at Flat 10 and what she was getting up to now. I worry about Edie more now that she's the only person left. My whole family. She's 29. Hasn't smelled the coffee yet. Yesterday she announced that she was going to her first office leaving drinks tomorrow. she's got a crush on a boy called Vassy. Vassy? I couldn't believe my ears. I reminded her that drinking's where Emmy started, and I just mentioned that she doesn't always make the right decisions in life. But so far, she's just brushed me off. Won't listen, just like her older sister. No, I'm going to put a stop to this drinks business, or my name's not Patty. I wish I could explain to her that going to these things is for other people. All I ever wanted was to keep her safe.